Welcome back to Roundtail Restoration, everybody. My name's Chris, and this is the differential for a early Triumph Spitfire. You can see that it's in many, many pieces here, and what I'm going to try to do is figure out how to rebuild these. It's not real easy, and I have no idea what I'm doing. But let's see what we can do. Thanks for watching. Let's get it sorted. So what you see here is a partially disassembled differential out of a 1966 Triumph Spitfire. I had a donor car during the rebuild process that I ended up using because this differential was not in good shape. The front pinion where it comes out was all kind of floppy and stuff just didn't spin real well and everything like that. So I took the donor's car differential and put it in and used that. Did minimal checks on that thing. But now I've got some pretty good noise and everything, and I have a feeling that it's that differential. I'm going to get my hand here at rebuilding differentials. It's not real easy. There's some black magic going on here. There's a lot of special tools that I don't have access to and nobody else does out of the workshop manual. But there are workarounds that you can get pretty close to getting good measurements. Obviously, I've still got some disassembly to do here and some cleaning. The ring and pinion will get replaced. I got some pretty good galling. You probably can't see it, but there's some pretty good galling on the gears. I can show you close up later when I get to that point. So we'll see. This is not going to be an instructional video. This is going to be a how I do it video. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never done this before. I've never tried to do this before. Who knows if it's going to be successful or not, but I figured, what the heck? I got this thing laying here, and until that other one eats itself, I might as well give it a shot. So we'll get going here and move on. We'll see how it goes. Apologize for the buzzing, but that's the ultrasonic sink that I've got the half of the case in. So this is the differential carrier here, and I need to get the ring gear off. And I've got several bolts here, and I can't hold on to it. So I've got it in the vise, not very tight, just trying to prevent it from twists so that I can get some leverage on it and get these bolts out. And then that should allow me to get the ring gear out. And then that'll allow me to get the planetary gears that are, or whatever they're called, sun gears. I think it's planetary gears on the inside. All right, so now that those are all loose, I'll get this out of the vise here, take it back over to the bench, and be able to get it apart a little more in control. But I think this ring gear should now just kind of drop away. No idea if there's shims in there or anything, so I'm just going to kind of grab a punch and stick it down in that hole and just kind of tap on it. Yep, that's all it takes. So that will probably just drop here. All right, there's that. Doesn't look like there are any shims there at all. So now we can move along to get the inner gears here apart, and there's a pin in there that holds this center piece in there. So you got to bang that pin out, and that goes through this way, and it should come out here, and then I should be able to get those gears out. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like I have a long enough drift, so let me see what I can find. I got most of the both halves of the cases mostly clean, and all of the bolts and everything that I had. There's a couple shims in there, the big spacer. I got them all cleaned up, soaked them in vinegar. They were pretty rusty. Soaked them in vinegar for a little bit, and now I've got them just sitting in a little bit of oil, and I'll save them for future use when I get to that point. Just gonna prevent them from rusting. Unfortunately, my ultrasonic sink decided that it didn't want to play anymore, and it quit on me while I was cleaning this guy. That's it for that kind of stuff. So now we'll move on and look at getting the rest of these bearings off of here, and then looking at some pinion stuff. A couple days later, I'm not exactly sure where I left off, but I was trying to drive this pin out. And when you drive that pin, that'll get this this pin that goes across here and holds that cluster gear together, and you'll be able to slide that out and then get in there. So I didn't have a drift punch that was long enough, so I went to the freight, of course, picked up this set of long drive pin punches, and tried the smallest one first because that's the only one that fit in the hole, and you might be able to see that I kind of bent the heck out of that guy, so oh well for that. But then I took the next largest size, and it wouldn't quite fit in the pinhole, so I just took it to my bench grinder and just kind of spun it as I ground it down a little bit just so it fit smoothly in there, and I was finally able to drive the punch through. So now this little center post should come out. I'll probably have to knock that through a little bit. Another one of these in here. I think there's spacers and stuff, so you want to keep an eye on stuff. You can see that's starting to come out there, so that's good. All right, so there's that pin. Doesn't look too bad. A little bit of dry spawn on it, but that thing looks okay. So we'll set that aside. And now these gears should pretty much just come right out. I don't think there's anything that's holding them in now except themselves. Yep, so I'm kind of just spinning it there. You can see the whole gear comes. Pull that guy out. That one falls down. That guy out. That guy out. That guy, maybe not yet. And then I believe there's moon spacers on the little guys. You can see that. That says 40 on it. Probably should have kept that. That says 40 on it. So those are the same. That's good. But that looks like it. All right. So now the guts of that are gone. And I'm not too sure if this doesn't come out. Oh, no, there it went. All right, that's got a spacer on it too, and there's spacers on this guy's too, so you want to keep that together. Make sure you don't mix those up, and we'll bag them separately, I think, just so I can keep it all together. But so now that's about it for as far as you can take stuff apart. So this is, and except for getting these bearings off, which I'm going to try that next, and the seals out of the half shafts. But otherwise, that's about as far as you can go. Checked all these gear teeth out just for galling and stuff like that. Don't see anything, and stuff that looks to be in pretty good shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a zip tie here and zip tie the gear and its little thrust washer together so that they don't come separated. All right, and that along with the pin. Get that bagged up, put that aside, move on. Couple things to do. I got to try to get these bearings off here. The little shafts here. There's a seal in here. I'm going to get those out. Those should just pump out or punch out. And then I want to get the races out of this end of the differential. The races, the one smaller race for the pinion is galled pretty good, and I'll just do the bigger one anyway. And yeah, so these should probably just knock right out, and we'll get that, and then get those, see how those racers are going to come out. That might be a little trickier. Thought I'd be able to knock this out just with a punch, but it's got a little bit of rust here. Not a little bit, quite a bit of rust here, and it's just kind of banging it up, holding it up. So I'm just going to take a socket, just about the right size there, get it in here, just pop it on the press. All right, that's it. Easy peasy. All right, that's what that little seal looks like. Off to more disassembly. Obviously, you can see I got a bearing puller set up here. This is just a cheapo Pittsburgh Harbor Freight bearing puller. It's actually starting to bend and everything, not in real great shape anymore. But it works. It's functional. The trick here with this one is I had to get those center gears out so that I could push against something to pull this bearing out. So you can see I've got the screw that's going to tighten down and just some random piece of metal in here that's solid, and then some 1/4 inch bar stock that I can push on. And I'm just going to go ahead and tighten this guy down, and then that should slowly lift the bearing as it comes up. So the trick here is going to be kind of getting everything to hold it steady enough so that I can do that. And once I'm done with that, I'll flip it over and do the other side. You probably heard that pop as it came off. That's just it releasing itself. So now same thing, other side. All right, so that other bearing came out very simply. A lot easier. It didn't pop or anything. It just kind of slid right off. So that thing is fully stripped. So that's good. I do intend to get all new bearings for this. Some of them are in good enough shape. A couple of them I messed up trying to get them off. But I might as well, you know, if you're going to refurb the thing, you might as well do the whole thing as far as I'm concerned. This larger inner pinion race here, I think is in good enough shape. Not good enough. It is in good shape. And I don't want to pound that out if I can help it. But the smaller pinion here is definitely galled. And instead of using like the workshop manual has, you use like a 2-eared thing and you go down, there's grooves cut in this thing and you can get to it. I'm going to try to use a socket here and pound it from this side. And the socket's just barely the right size Might just be, I wish I could have one just a touch bigger, but I don't. So I'm going to stick that in there, use a piece of metal to contact that, and pound that down. So let me find that piece of metal and I'll be right back. All right, so just gotta, this piece of metal is just barely the right size, but I gotta watch because I'll mess up this inner race here. All right, so I'm just gonna kind of hit on it and see if I can't get this to at least break free a little bit. I think it's already moving. Yeah, that's definitely moving. All right, good. So now I want to change over to a block that's hopefully, again, trying to be careful not to mar that inner race, but this is coming out pretty well. Not incredibly even, but pretty well. All right, well, unfortunately, this block is too wide, so I'm going to use the drift punch, hopefully, and just go rock it back and forth. Right, got that. All right, so there's that race, and you're probably not going to be able to see it, but there's galling in there. That's about as stripped down as you can get it. So the bearings are available from Rock Auto, believe it or not, and they're actually pretty well priced. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up the set of bearings from those guys in this this race here. And then, really, that's about it. So I'll show you the, probably not going to be able to see here, but this is the original Pinion set. And in here on these teeth, really bad galling. I don't think you can see that. I do have a new set of gears that I picked up from a gentleman on my favorite forum. Now these gears are matched, and I'll show you that real quick how you know. So this is nice and pretty. This is the end of the Pinion gear, and maybe you can see these two discolored spots, one right there and one up here. And what's in there, and you're definitely not going to be able to see them, is etched a number. So this top one is 4667, and then the bottom one is -1. On the ring gear, you have the number, and in this case, that guy's right there. You can see that shiny spot, and you have to take my word for it, but that says 4667, and then there's an S. I'm not quite sure what the S is for. On my original set, I had the number 4800, and it's funny because the 4s are written the same way. I wonder if it's the same handwriting, which would mean the same guy. Anyway, that's kind of cool. And then the Pinion is 4800, and that's +1. So what they these are machined and matched pairs, and when they finally measure them out and get all their tolerances set up, that +1 and -1 is how much you have to compensate for when you put this thing together for all the stack heights and everything. But because I'm measuring this exact height, I don't need to make that differentiation. I don't need to take that into account, so I can disregard that number. Now I know at least that these are a match set, as they should be, which means they're machined together and they're going to mesh perfectly, and they're in much better shape than they want. So we'll get this package back up and move on to something else. Got the differential case cleaned up and painted finally. First thing I'm going to do now is check the pinion height. So the pinion height is going to be essentially from the center line of the carriers, which is going to be mounted up here. And this flat right here is just about center of the bearing. So we're going to measure it from that height all the way down to the top of the pinion here. Now, the way the Triumph does it is they have a special tool that fits in to where this the carrier goes down, and it measures down to the top of the pinion. And then it gives you an offset. And that offset is the number of shims that you need, or the thickness of the shim pack that you need. Well, I can't find those special tools anymore. Nobody makes them, obviously. So what I'm doing is the spec in the workshop manual is 3 inches exactly to the thousandth from the center line of this carrier bearing down to the base here of the pinion. Not the top of the gear, but the base. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the pinion in with the bearings and everything like that, and I'm going to measure from the center line here with a depth micrometer down to the top of the pinion. What I've also done is I've measured the pinion from where the shims are going to go, which are going to fit right here, and I've measured that thickness. So I'll add those two thicknesses together, and then the delta in that is going to be the difference that I need for the shims. Now I have some shims here that are left over when I took this thing apart. I think I might be missing some. and I'll share that with you why here in a little bit. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put these bearings on, and what I also did just to make it easier is this larger bearing, the head bearing, is a press fit. It's an interference fit. So because these are the old bearings, I'm going to replace them. What I did was I reamed out the inside a little bit with my Dremel tool. The smaller bearing is not interference fit, but it could be. So I've also reamed that out a little bit. And what this will allow me to do is just going to make it a lot easier to get this thing in and out, because you got to do a lot of trial and error here. And it also saves me from having to take the potential damage of pressing on and off the new bearings and breaking something. So no shim pack at all. There's usually a spacer in here and all that kind of stuff for this. But for now, all we're going to do is essentially put these bearings on here, drop the pinion in, and then we're going to tighten it up. And there's obviously some special stuff you got to do for tightening it up, and I'll get to that here in a second. But for now, pretty straightforward. So, like I said, that just goes on, no shims. We'll drop that in. Comes out the back here. This bearing goes in. That just kind of sits in there. Then tells you to take, this is where the differential, or excuse me, the prop shaft is going to bolt up to. So you take the prop shaft flange, and it's keyed, or the teethed, whatever you want to call it. That goes in there, and it goes in one way a little bit better than another way for me. All right, and then you get the big flat washer, stick that in there, and then the castle nut, stick that in there. And we're going to grab 7/8 inch socket, get this tightened up, and you tighten it up to a certain spec, which I'll show you here in a second. All right, you can just hold this flange and tighten it up. It's not very difficult, but the workshop manual does tell you to spin this as you tighten, because you want the bearings to not be crooked or anything like that, and be able to roll freely. Now, you don't want to tighten it too much. Just to start, you can see that's real easy to spin. You want to tighten it until you start to get a little resistance to the spin. Work it back and forth, in and out a little bit. All right, that's starting to get some tightness on it now. So, another special tool, what the workshop manual tells you is it's almost like a torque wrench. It is essentially a torque wrench. You can use if you have a dial torque wrench or a beam torque wrench that will measure in inch pounds. What you can do is you tighten this nut here until it takes 12 to 16 inch pounds to turn the differential, just the pinion gear. I don't have a beam torque wrench or a dial torque wrench that will work for me. So instead, what I do is I'm going to take a yardstick. I'm going to mount it halfway in, right in the middle here, and I'm going to hang a 1 pound weight off of it. Where that 1 pound weight goes out is going to tell me how many inch pounds it is. So I have a pound of weight here that I measured out. So that's a pound. And I'm going to put this guy here at 18 inches, which is right in the center, right? Because I want to account for the fact that this yardstick is long, and whatever weight I've got on one side, I want to have on the other side. So it cancels out the weight of the yardstick. And I'm going to take that weight and I'm going to slide it down here. 16 inch pounds. So 16 inches from center line. If I hang a pound, this thing should turn. That's the resistance that you want. So 16 plus 18 is 34. So I'm going to take that 1 pound of weight and slide it all the way out. And when I get out to about 34 inches or so, that thing should turn. The differential should start to turn. Now, I'm sure right now it's a lot less than that. That doesn't feel like anything at all, so I might put a little tweak on it. The only problem really with doing it this way is every time I want to go adjust it, I've got to pull this yardstick off, because the yardstick, as you can see, blocks the nut. So that's inconvenient. I don't really want to cut the yardstick up. But all I'm going to do is take 2 bolts and kind of pinch them here, and then measure this up. So let me tighten this just a little bit more, and I'll get it all together, and I'll show you what it looks like. Got my high-tech contraption bolted up here, and it's just snugged up with the flat washers. And put the weight here. Try not to interfere with the table. All the way up here, and it's already turning. All right, so that's nothing. So I got to tighten that up quite a bit more. So again, you'll get a feel for it as you go, and to get to kind of walk it up. What I would caution is is that when you tighten this down and it compresses everything, if you have to back off of it, it immediately loosens up. So you go from tight where you can't turn it at all, and as soon as you kind of get that friction off of there, it'll loosen right up. You can take that nut all the way off. What you need to do is you kind of knock it around and spin it and everything and kind of re-get the resistance to it, because it almost compresses, and then it sticks there. So even when you take the tension of the nut off, it stays stuck there. So if you don't kind of reset that and kind of loosen it back up to find where it is on the nut, you can get off on your measurements. So if you can walk it up and get to the point where you're just tight enough to get the required torque, you're better off than to having to loosen something up. So I'm going to be a little cautious as I dial it up. It's going to be a bunch of iterations here. When I get a little closer, I'll come back and show you. Got the yardstick set up here. Got my highly technical 1 pound of weight. Now, as the weight goes, you got to kind of hold, depending on what kind of setup you have here, you might have to hold the differential so it doesn't roll on you or anything like that, and just kind of slowly run that guy out. It's 32 inches, 33 inches, it's 34. Sometimes you got to overcome the friction a little bit, and it'll start to roll on you. Let's see. Could probably go just a touch tighter or a touch looser. But that's pretty close right now. So if I tap it, put it at 31 inches, tap it, doesn't really want to go. I put it out at 33 or so, tap it, it'll want to go by itself. 34, tap it, it definitely wants to go. So I'm going to call that good. Again, 12 to 16 inch-pounds here, so that's, that's good. With new bearings, it does specify that you want to get closer to the 16 inch-pounds. Reason being is obviously as you exercise this thing and kind of stuff settles in and all, it's going to tend to loosen up, so you want to be on the tighter side. So again, that's with nothing in this at all. All I've got in here is the pinion and the two bearings that hold it in. No spacers, no shims, nothing. It's tight, and what that does is kind of preload on it, and now with that preload, I'm going to go in and I'm going to measure the height from that center line of the carrier bearing down to the top of the pinion. So we'll take this off here and kind of reset. Took several iterations, spun the gear, took measurements, and I'm pretty much consistently getting 1.940 inches. So from the center line to the top of the pinion is 1.940. If I add the pinion gear height into that, let's see what I get here. So 1.940 plus 1195. That's equal to 3.0595. So what that tells me is I need to raise the height, right? The spec is 3 inches. And since I'm measuring the depth, I don't want to go as deep. So this 3.0595 is too deep. So if I bring it up, I'm going to have to add shims into there, which are going to be equal to about 0.06 or so. And that should give me 3.0005, give or take. Now, I don't have enough shims to do that. I've got 3 of the old shims in here. I don't know if I lost some. I checked other measurements with the old pinion gear and stuff like that. The only thing I can come to the conclusion of is that I did lose some. I don't know. It's been a very long time since I took this thing apart, and maybe, who knows, it could have been taken apart in the past, though it doesn't appear that way. But anyway, the shims that I have don't add up to that 0.06. I've got more like 0.03, 0.025 or so. And I also have some distance in the thickness, or difference, excuse me, in the thickness of the bearing. So I'm going to do some math real quick, figure out the shims that I've got, figure out the bearing height differences, figure out the pinion depths and all that kind of stuff. And I'll come up with the total shim pack thickness that I need, and I'll show you how I get there here in a sec. So here's the math. Pinion height measured with the micrometer and with a dial indicator, I got 1.1195. The pinion depth that I just showed you, I measured with the depth micrometer, I got 1.9400. The bearing correction that I measured between the old bearing and the new bearing I've only got about 1/1000th of a difference in between the two in the height, so I'm going to try to account for that. So I'm going to add, because the new bearing is just a touch skinnier or not as thick, however you want to look at it, as the old bearing, that's going to make the pinion height drop. So I want to add that in, and I'm going to get a total of 3.0605. The spec is 3.000, so obviously the delta there is 0.0605. And then I accounted for all the shims that I currently have, and I'm left out with 0.0385. So I need to buy shims to account for that. The shims are available in 0.003, 0.005, and 0.010 thicknesses. So I'll go ahead and do that math and figure out how many of the shims I need, order a couple extras because, you know, can never hurt. And I'll get those shims in, and then we'll use the new bearing with the new shims and put them in there, and then do the measurements again and see what I get. Going to get ahead of myself here a little bit, but I wanted to point out that 12 to 16 inch-pounds that you get with rotation, when you go to put this thing together and you get those shims in there and everything set up, the shims that go here, which is what I just measured for, only adjust the pinion height, right? So they shim up here and they'll make that thing go up and down. What you don't assemble in here for setting the pinion height, and again, this is all per the workshop manual, I'm not making anything up here. What you don't assemble in here yet is once you get those pinions in there, then you get this little guy, and this little spacer here is going to fit down in this. It's going to sit on top of the bearing, right? It's not going to sit there like that. Make sure I get my orientation right here. So that guy is going to fit down on here, and then on top of here you get a whole bunch of smaller spacers. What that does is that sets the preload. So once we get these spacers in here set, get that pinion down, get that measured, it's all good. Then you put this together with the spacer, put the spacer in here, get those shims, put the shims in here, get it torqued down, but now you bring your torque up to 70 foot-pounds. Well, that's a lot, obviously. When you get that 70 foot-pound set, this should still turn between 12 to 16 inch-pounds of resistance. The difference here is that you've got this spacer and the shims. So this spacer kind of pinches in here, and it prevents any more load being thrust onto these bearings and kind of clamping the whole thing up. It just rides that. Later on, when we go to test that, you'll see that those spacers in there, and then you take those shims in or out, and I'm going to order several of those too just to have them. You'll take those shims in and out, and the workshop manual says, you know, you can adjust the number of shims, and that'll change your resistance to rotation. But we'll get more on that when we get there. But for now, we'll get these new shims on order and get the pinion height set. Yeah, the season has drawn to an end, at least for me. The weather was nice today. Got a nice drive, and then got back, changed the oil, filled the gas tank up, put some stable in it, and just did my my normal routine. If you want to see what I do before I pack the Spitfire away for the winter, you can watch the video that I'm going to link to up in the overhead here and in the description. But otherwise, it's not too major. But hopefully next season we'll have a new differential, and I got some parts today, so we'll continue on with rebuilding this thing. So like I said, I got the shims, or I got parts, and those parts were mainly the shims here. I got 3 10,000ths, 2 5,000ths, and 2 3,000ths. And I also got the smaller shims that I haven't really showed you yet. I got a handful of 3,000ths and 10,000ths for those. They only come in 2 sizes. So I've done all my math already, showed you all that. I'm going to take these shims, get them stacked to the shim pack thickness that I think I need, get this thing back in, get it tightened down, do everything like I showed you before, and then check the height, and we'll see what we get. So I won't bore you with putting it all back together. I'll just come back when I go to measure the height and give you the results. You've seen this already. So I got the shim pack in there. If you remember, the bearings, the new and the old bearings, has a slight difference in height. And what I'm getting right now is 2.9955 inches. So what's that? 5,000 shy of 3 inches to the 1,000th. And the new bearing is just a little bit skinnier, a little bit shorter than the old bearing. So what I'm going to do is I've got one more 5,000ths shim here. At least I think I do. Yeah, I got 2 of them actually. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and I'll swap the bearing, put the new bearing on, add that shim pack in there, that one single shim, and measure it up again and kind of cross my fingers and hope that does it. I'm going to recheck my math real quick because I'm not real good at that on the fly, but that'll hopefully do it, and I'll be done with that portion, and then we'll move on to setting the actual preload. Got the bearing puller set up here as a bearing presser. Now this you can see this, all these shims here, they're kind of splaying out now. It's I don't know, it's a lot of shims, but anyway, you want to make sure here that you get this bearing completely seated. So it's got to go down tight. If I had the capability, I'd probably use the press in this case, but I don't. I've looked and I don't have any tube or anything that can fit over here and then not be afraid that I'm going to jack the bearing up by doing it that way. So I'm just going to use this guy instead. So you want to make sure, like I said, that you get this nice and tight, that bearing is fully seated, because it will seat on you as you use it. And if you didn't get it all the way and you measured your shim pack based off of that, you know, you're going to be off. Now, I think I have the right amount of shims here because of my pre-testing. So hopefully if I don't get it seated all the way, I'm going to see that when I get these numbers that are going to be all messed up. I did add about a tenth or 10 thousandths to this thing. One to account for the difference that I had, the 5 thousandths that I had difference. That was a little short, and the 5 thousandths difference that I have in the bearing height. So hold on a minute. Let me do some math. Yep, see, now I just about almost screwed that up. So the bearing difference actually is 1 thousandths, not 10 thousandths. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to pull one of those 5 thousandths out of there, and then that should get me set up. So let me do that real quick and I'll get back into it. See? Math. Gotta love it. All right, got that 5 thousandths shim out of there, so I should be good now. And you just go and tighten this puppy down. Put a little lubricant Marvel mystery oil on here, just to, I don't know how much it'll help, but help it slide on there, hopefully. Now this is a, like I said, this is an interference fit, so I expect it not to be incredibly easy. All right, so I'll get this tightened down. I'm going to have to put it in a vise probably or something, get some more leverage on it. I'll come back when I got it seated. So now that we got the pinion height set, the next part is you will assemble this, and you've got this spacer here, so that spacer goes down, and then you've got a bunch of shims here. Now what these shims are going to do is they're going to set the preload. In other words, how hard it is to turn this thing when it's sitting there. So you can see on this piece of wood here, I got a bunch of circular shims. I have some brand new ones here. These are all the ones that came out of the car originally. So you just stack these onto this, and what that does is it controls how tight you can press down on this thing, and that spacer contacts all that stuff, so the pinion will tend to float in there, but it will, you know, crunch it together. So what you do is you just crunch it together until when you do 70 pounds of torque on that nut out here, you get that same 12 to 16 inch-pounds required to make the thing rotate. So I've already tested it once with all the original shims, and it's way loose. So now essentially you'll just add shims to get up to that 12 to 16 inch-pounds when you've got it torqued to 70 foot-pounds. So a lot of trial and error here, in and out. I'm going to use the new bearing, the smaller one that goes up here, the pinion side bearing. That does not press fit. It can be a little bit, but it's not real tight, not like this guy was. Obviously you need that so you can get this thing back apart. So hopefully it doesn't get on there too tight, but we're just going to do a bunch of iterations here. And again, I'm just stacking these spacers, and when I get it, I'll come back and show you. So I got the shim pack in there. And like I said, what you do is you tighten the nut down to 70 foot-pounds, and then you put the weight on there. So obviously I know where I'm at. This is just a touch off, but it will, if I give it a little bit of help, it will fall. So I'm going to leave it at that. The workshop manual gets into, hey, if you've got a shim pack, if you remove about 4 thousandths, that gives you several inch-pounds of torque to either add or subtract, and it does set up a ratio. But because I don't have an accurate torque wrench here, right? I'm just using this equivalent. There's no way to quantify how much I am as I did it. So I just had to do trial and error. So I've got it to about the point where I am. So I'm afraid now, based on the shim thicknesses, you can get them either 3 thousandths or 10 thousandths. At least that's what I have. I'm afraid if I go either way now, I'm going to go further than where I'm at right now. So I'm going to leave it at what it is and call it good. All right, so now that the pinion height and the pinion preload are set, next step is going to be to put the differential carrier on. This guy, get that all set up, and then you have to measure the differences on that. essentially all this did here with setting these all up is to get the pinion and the ring gear to mesh up properly and get the engagement pattern to be set properly. So I potentially am not done yet. Once I get to the point where I'm ready to set that up and measure that tooth engagement and everything, I may have to adjust some more shims. So I'm not out of the woods yet, but that's how you do that. So at least for a Triumph Spitfire differential, probably a GT6 would be somewhat similar. And my guess is probably all differentials are somewhat similar. That's how you can set it with relatively simple tools. Again, I think the depth micrometer is the key there. If you've got one of them, that makes stuff a lot easier. But otherwise, that's all I got. So in the next video, we'll be dealing with the carrier and the ring gear and all that kind of stuff. But that's it for this one. So thanks again for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.